Hey everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk to people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, and I write historical suspense and historical fantasy. And we are missing one co-host. We still have David M. Kelly. He writes science fiction, but as you guys might notice, Richard H. Stevens, epic fantasy author, is not here tonight. But it's for good reasons. Don't worry, nothing to worry about. His wife's son is graduating college soon, so it's a very exciting time, and we wish his wife's son all the best. So you're stuck with just the two of us, and I know some of you are probably going to leave now, but try to stick around because we have an awesome guest. Before we introduce her, just to let you know, this is a live interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with both questions for our guest and to comment on what you hear in the show. So tonight we're welcoming Mack Little, and she writes historical fiction and horror. Welcome, Mack. Great to have you here.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So before we get into all our questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Okay, so I'm Mack Little. I'm from Conyers, Georgia. It's a small town outside of Atlanta. It was rural when I grew up there, but now it's just a metropolitan area. Um, I did my undergrad at the University of Dubuque in Iowa. After that, I was in the Army, and during all this time, I was a frustrated writer. And finally, in my mid 40s, I wrote my first novel. It was a horror called Progeny, and in the midst of writing horror, I fell in love with the history and the romance. So I wanted to write a book that was dedicated totally to the history and romance. So my second book is Daughter of Hades. It's out now for 99 cents in honor of Gay Pride Week, and month. And yeah, Daughter of Hades is a historical romance set in the 17th century. And I can't wait to talk to you guys about it.
Super exciting. We're so
Yeah.
glad to have
Oh,
you here.
I
Mhm.
saw a question. Yes, there are famous people from Conyers.
Cool.
Bones from the original Star Trek is
Mhm.
from Conyers, and Holly Hunter and Dakota Fanning. They all come from Conyers.
Wow.
We're producing
Mm.
great talent there.
That's
There
cool.
you
Wow. Fantastic. So, I have like so many questions actually, and it's hard to pick what to start with. But, I just want to start with, you write horror and you already insinuated or told us rather that, as you were writing, your first book, which was horror, you started to fall in love with the history. Now, how exactly did that happen? I know you said 17th century. Wow, that sounds awesome.
Mhm.
So like tell us a little bit about how that happened. Horror does not always necessarily mix like, with history.
Uh, yes. So my book Progeny is about a female resident in Houston who has these dark powers, and the source of her powers go back to ancient Africa, Ethiopia, and Yemen, which was known as Sheba, the kingdom of Sheba. And so, as I was studying the history of that period, I got really involved with all the details. I love collecting all the details and finding the morsels of information that people had not heard of. I mean, like, who was the Queen of Sheba? What was her name? So I was able to explore uh, her and and the politics of that time, and it was just fascinating. And also, when I was creating the monsters for my horror book, they're all based on mythological creatures from the Abrahamic religion. So the demons of the Hebrews were originally gods in Samaria and Mesopotamia, and the demons of the Hebrews also became jinn, or the jinn of the Islamic, text. So
Mhm.
I was able to explore religion, culture, politics, and I just wanted to. After doing that, I wanted to do something that completely immersed me in the story. The progeny was basically a dual timeline with the present and the past. So with Daughter of Hades, we stay in the past.
So,
And
sorry.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to read Margaret's comment, and that is, this
Go
is
ahead.
so cool. Right up, PJ. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. Clark territory. Apologize. She's asking.
oh, I'm going to have to write that down so I can explore that.
Me too. That's really cool. That's cool. Go ahead, David.
So, sorry, Mac, you were saying in your bio it says that you've like lived in Spain and Germany and many parts of the US, and you've had this very, very varied background in terms of like careers and experiences. So, does that experience of different places and cultures and all of those experiences that you've kind of like you've had, does that find its way into your books?
Absolutely. And now I'm able to incorporate the research into my travel because I still love to travel. Um, I mean, I wish I could go to Yemen. I wish I could go to Ethiopia, but they're like hotbeds right now, so I can't. So, but yeah, uh, in Progeny, Paris features somewhat prominently in the book, and my explorations of the city wind up in the story and integrated into the story. And one year I traveled to Calcutta, Italy. It's like next to Mazzano, Italy. It's a deserted medieval town that was that's now been inhabited by artist squatters. And so I went to Mazzano and I hiked to the medieval city and explored it and just, soaked it in so that I can, incorporate into my novel. Um, in France, I found out about a human zoo, which is amazing. That they actually, yes, it was back in the 1800s when all of Europe were showing their colonial might, and so Paris opened up this zoo with humans from all of their colonial holdings, and they replicated their homes and kept the people there.
Wow.
And it sounds hideous, and and I think it was hideous. It was an aberration. Now it's deserted, and I like to go there when I go to Paris now, and just to sit and write and absorb, the history of it, the horror of it, or whatever. And yeah, so all of that finds its way into my book. And I'm going to be going to Paris in a couple of weeks. And since I've been writing about Dieppe, which is on the northern coast of France, I'm just going to take a trip up there, a couple of hours trip, and roam around Dieppe and see if I can find some little tidbits to add into the second iteration of Daughter of Hades. Let's see, there was something else I wanted to tell you about my travels that was really cool. I'll think of it later.
Yeah, absolutely. Just break in when you think of it. So, that is amazing, and that is a lot of writers' dreams, to travel and go to the place that their story takes place in, or some place that might be valid to the story. So, like, what other ways do you research your stories?
Oh, wow. A lot. There's so many different ways. First, I'll start with the search on Google. I'll read a Wikipedia article and I'll find threads and I'll pull them. JustStore is my best friend because it has academic, peer-reviewed articles that I can pull the history from, get different perspectives and interpretations of history that I can draw from when I'm writing my books. YouTube is also invaluable. Sometimes, like I can't go to Yemen, and I wish I could go to Yemen, but there are drones there that take me over the countryside. Google Earth, I can really you know focus in on the areas and, and let it feed my imagination. Sometimes I just listen to music that gets me into the mood of the place. And that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, like the way that you are kind of describing, like you start with Wikipedia, take the threads, and then find like the actual resources and spread it. I do that exact same thing. And I don't know why, but everything is so much easier to find on Wikipedia than anywhere else. And then you
Yes.
just get the idea. And of course you can't, trust it. So you have to go elsewhere to make sure, but that's such a great way to do it. Yeah.
But also what's beautiful about Wikipedia and being a novelist and a fiction writer is that even if it isn't true, you can play with it. You can play with some of the
Fiction part,
ideas
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And there are great resources at the bottom, right? They have some newspaper articles, even from the time. It's really cool.
And they have popular references and culture, so you can go and watch movies and things like that or read books that. Oh yeah, indexing is. I'm bad at that. I'm so disorganized. I try very hard to keep up with my resources. If you look in the back of the Daughter of Hades, I have a whole bibliography of all the resources I use so that you can go and do your research if you find anything interesting in the history that I brought up. But but keeping track of all that information that I gather, because then when I go to my second novel or when I go to my sequels, I need to be able to refer back to that information and keep up with it.
Yeah.
So that's just as important as finding the information.
So in all of this research, then Mac, have you learned anything that's kind of like really, really surprised you? I mean, other than the human zoo?
Oh my God, so many things. Okay, so since it's Gay Pride Month and we're talking about Daughter of Hades, one thing that really got me going was in the 17th century, the 18th century, they had something called metallotages. And it's basically a same-sex civil union between pirates, basically pirates. It was something that the French came up with. They realized the realities of men being in a same-sex environment, that, relationships develop. So they created this thing. Now, basically, it's a contract where the two individuals can share their income and have someone to leave their inheritance to, but it's also them making a pact to defend each other and come to each other's defense, and they live together, and a lot of times that was the binding thing for relationships that develop between the men, romantic relationships that develop between them. Also interesting, and also interesting was that, like in the metallotage, men would leave their wives to their metalog, so they would share wives. In this agreement. Wow. So how could I not write about that? And I would like to. I kind of have the threads of a story where we have two pirates sharing a woman. I would love to write a story like that.
Yeah. That is really, really interesting. I didn't know anything. I don't think I knew anything about that. That's really cool.
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So, well, actually, let's read. Margaret is also a historical fiction author, by the way. She says, did you know that besides Pride Month, there's also Ancientsathon and Caribathon on BookTube this month? Your month is tailor-made. That is great.
I didn't know that.
Margaret is like, she knows everything. She knows all the things, especially about you too. Thank you, Margaret. That's fantastic. So, go ahead. Did you have something?
I remember what I forgot to tell you guys about my travels, my research that finds its way into my novel. Well, my novel found its way into my life because one of my vampires lives in an abandoned castle in France, Traumoutier, France. And researching the castle, it's abandoned. It's been abandoned since 1930 or something like that. And as I was researching, I found out they were crowdsourcing to refurbish the castle. I had already gone, to Trois-Moutiers and explored the castle, but now I'm part owner of the castle,
Wow.
and that's something I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks. Is going to Paris, then to Trois-Moutiers to volunteer to work on refurbishing the castle. So
That
that's
is
so
cool.
that's something that from my novel that found its way into my real life.
Wow. I hope you're
As
going to
long
keep.
as you don't become a vampire.
Yeah.
In France, in Paris, they have a vampire museum, and you can only get a tour if you make an appointment. So I'm kind of on the fence about that because, what if I'm the only one on the tour? What if this
Yeah.
guy is a real vampire?
Can you
I
imagine?
may never come back.
Oh boy. I hope you're going to keep us updated though on your trip and like the things that you find and you learn and everything on social media or something, because
Oh
I will be
yeah,
watching.
I'll be posting like
That is
crazy.
really cool. Yeah. So, you were saying that maybe this will be, you're already thinking about, of course, the plots for the next books. You actually have two series. You have two book ones, I believe,
Hmm.
and they're for individual series. So,
Mm.
have you kind of like planned out these series, or is this more of like you're coming up with the ideas, like you're pantsing, you're coming up with the ideas as it goes, and you're not sure how many like books will be in these series?
Well, I have ideas like for the progeny. The second novel was already written, but it was too long, so I had to cut it in half and like make two novels out of it.
Mm.
So three novels are there already for progeny that are just
Mm.
waiting to go.
Nice.
And for Daughter of Hades, I've written a novella just for the interim before I get book two out. And one of the characters in Daughter of Hades fascinated me. It was in the book he's Badu, but I kind of based him on a couple of historical figures. One is Busa, who led a slave revolt in Barbados, and the other is Black Caesar, who was a pirate. It was a black pirate. Um, he was on a slave ship from Africa, and he befriended one of the crew members. A storm hit. Him and the crew member mutinied, took over the ship, and it crashed. And they would take this little boat out, and they would rob passing ships together, as pirates. And then they became a part of Blackbeard's crew. So those two characters have kind of, you know, mixed up their histories and made another character called Badu. And I wrote a novella showing his life in pre-colonial Africa, and on a dual timeline showing his life as he tries to escape Barbados after the revolt.
Mm,
So, and right now I'm working on finishing book two, and yeah.
nice.
Cool. So you said that you came, your childhood was in a small kind of like rural community. Um, and your website, I noticed it mentions a Southern Gothic edge to your writing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I grew up in a very small enclave. It was everyone knew everyone else, and me as a child, I could go to anyone's house and just call my mom and say, "I'm going to spend the night here." I I've slept in every house in the neighborhood as a child, and for a while I stayed with these old ladies, mother and daughter. They were old to me. They're like 50s and 70s. And they lived in this little pink house, and it appears in Progeny. And they had no running water. We had an outhouse. We drew our water from a well. We used chamber pots. It was a very nice home. It had very beautiful furniture. It just didn't have those modern conveniences. We had a pot-bellied stove, and so I grew up with surrounded by stories. We're always telling stories. My grandmother, Flora, told me all these wonderful stories, and some of them are like really scary. They're really exciting, and and all that stuff is kind of wormed its way into my head, and it comes out at the most unexpected times when I'm writing.
Yeah. So it's really cool to think that, when we're reading your books, we could be actually reading something that came from a part of your life. And I
Yeah.
think that that's fascinating whenever I find that out about an author, that it's not just, some kind of historical fiction of a time period, but it's something from the actual author. It's kind of, I guess you could kind of call it in a way an Easter egg, for people who know you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool.
I hope they're reading the book so they can catch it.
Yeah. Yeah. That is cool.
So one of the reviews of Progeny says that the book connects, and I'm reading here, a broad cross-section of readers with a multicultural cast of characters belonging to populations historically underrepresented in publishing. So do you think that we were progressing in terms of presenting more diverse voices in terms of authors and fictional characters?
I think we are progressing, but it's not quick enough for me. And I understand there are obstacles. I understand because I present my book to critique groups. I use critique groups, and I know that there's a hesitation of white authors of writing about people of color because they're afraid they're going to offend someone or be accused of cultural appropriation and that sort of thing. But I think those are just excuses. I'm a Black woman. I grew up, poor on a farm, but I write from the point of view of rich white men, gay white men. I write from the point of view of Middle Easterners and Indians, and is basically finding the thread of is basically tapping into the humanity of the character and not their cultural baggage.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? One of my latest books features a character, for instance, who's Native American, and I must admit, I felt some of that before I started writing this. I kind of had this idea of writing this character who's actually a spin-off from another book series. But I must admit, I hesitated because I was thinking, what kind of reaction am I going to get here if I do this? And eventually I just kind of came to the conclusion that the only thing I could do was to write him just as a character, as any other character, and get to the core of what that character was and kind of move with it. But I can understand, like you said, that there is like a certain hesitation there.
And I even hesitate a little bit writing about the Caribbean, since I'm not from the Caribbean, but I tapped into some of our common histories, our common threats of humanity, and maybe I got some things wrong. But if I did, I would want to have a conversation about what I had wrong, and have the opportunity to get it right, or inspire some other writer to get it right and write something, because the stuff I'm writing, I was inspired from what I've seen, like Black Sails. I love that television show, and I wanted to see it continue. So that's basically why I want to write this pirate novel, because of Black Sails, and they turned me on to the Maroons, the slaves that self-liberated from the Spanish and lived in their own community in the cockpits of Jamaica. And I was like, who are these people? And I started doing my research, and this story, my novel evolved from that. So, don't be afraid. I mean, this could be like a jumping off ground for another artist to bring something to the forefront.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super helpful and extremely encouraging, really. So, Margaret, the Black Sails
No,
are
not Our Flag Means Death. I really didn't like that one very much. I like Black Sails. but our flat means death. I did the humor. It was kind of dry. It was like, no, I like really gritty pirate stories.
So since we're talking about diversity right now, and you've said that your cast of characters is diverse, let's hear a little bit about those characters, you know, how you've developed them and who they are. I think in particular, maybe Daughter of Hades, but, you know, whichever.
Okay, so let's see. Daughter of Hades is about two sets of siblings that escape oppression. The first set are twins who escape slavery in Barbados on a pirate ship with the pirate Badu had befriended to take his children to freedom in Jamaica to live with the Maroons. That's Denny and Jimmy. And the other set of twins are brothers who are French Huguenots who are persecuted in France, and they find their way to the Caribbean under contracts of indenture, and the two meet. The pair of siblings' lives become intertwined, and on the pirate ship, Denny, the enslaved Black woman, she meets a Chinese pirate, a pirate who is of Chinese descent, and it's little known that there was a population of Asians in South and Central America during the 17th century and 18th century, but they're not talked about. And I recently read an article that they're going back to research these communities. I happened to read an article that there was a thriving community in Mexico because China and Japan got their silver from Mexico and in the Philippines. And so I wanted to bring one of those characters into my novel and get people to thinking about what other populations might be in the Caribbean. Let's see. Oh, Denny and Jimmy, who escaped slavery in Barbados, their parents are Badu, who is an African, and their mother is an Irish indentured servant who is serving a life sentence for her crimes in Ireland. And she and Badu were married, and there was an alliance between the Irish indentures and the African slaves until the slave master saw that them working together was a threat to their power, so they created divisions between them to keep their power divided. So I want to highlight that aspect of diversity in the Caribbean. Let's see, what else? Pirates come from all over. I have a Scottish pirate as a tipping my hat to Outlander, which I also love. And in the second book, we'll get to go see his home in Scotland and look at his story.
Nice, nice. Margaret,
how's that?
That is great. Yeah. Margaret writes Scottish, so I believe. So she'll love that. Since she's here, she puts pirates, the OG outcasts. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Yeah.
So, Mac, how do you kind of like develop your plots and your characters? I mean, are you kind of like somebody who does lots and lots of planning beforehand, or is it all kind of like more free flow? Are you more of a pantser or what?
I am a definite pantser. What I do is I have a general idea of what I want the story to be, and then I go in and I do my research for the period, and I find out what's going on there culturally and politically, and that. So I just have like a little nebulous sphere to work within, and then I do very detailed character sheets, for my main characters. And then as new characters come in, I'll do a smaller sheet for them. But for my main characters, I do a very detailed character sheet. And then I look at what's going on politically in that time era and culturally and see how it affects my character. And a lot of time that tells me where the story's going to go. So when I was researching the Maroons in Jamaica during the 17th century, like I started out in 1949. And when I was reading that, so much was happening during that year. King Charles I was beheaded. There was in 1644, the Ming Dynasty was overthrown by the Qing Dynasty, and and there was all this upheaval. And then later, after I wrote the book, I read another article that the reason for the upheaval could have been due to the fact that during the 1600s, the Earth was going through a mini ice age, and so it was causing all these droughts and famine and diseases that definitely affected China and caused these uprisings and to overthrow their governments. So, once you get into it, you find out all these wonderful tidbits. So in 1949, so many things were happening at once.
Yeah. So just wondering about sort of like the order that and of course, like our writing processes change all the time, it really depends on what's working, I know. But, typically would you say that you kind of like start out a story and then cross-reference it with the time period you've chosen to see what was going on, and that leads the story? Or would you say you like figure out what was going on first, beforehand, like, or is it like during? At what point?
It's usually during the story, I think. I think I let historical events direct me, because basically I wanted to write about the British invasion of Jamaica. Jamaica was originally occupied by the Spanish, and the British invaded in 1655. And that was the story I wanted to write, but it was too long. So I had to chop it up. So that's how Denny and Lee, who are my main romantic interest in Daughter of Hades, they were minor characters in the original novel I was writing, but I had to go and flesh them out and give them history. And so in order to tell their story, I had to figure out what was going on in the world. And as I said, Lee is exiled from China after the Ming Dynasty collapse. And so I was able to tie that into my little pirate story. And so I have a general idea, but once I start writing and get into the details and the minutia, then the history shows me where to go.
Is it kind of like Margaret says, reading about British and Belize right now?
Oh, interesting.
Cool. Yeah, they've been everywhere. The British, they've just been everywhere.
Oh yeah, those British. They're like the villains in every story.
I know.
Poor British.
Thanks.
Poor British. How do you feel about that, David?
Actually,
do you have a counterpoint?
No, I don't actually. It's I mean, there have been some terrible episodes in British history, and being somebody who certainly was British originally, it's very difficult to kind of come to terms with that. That's kind of part of the heritage of your culture. It's like, but they've done absolutely bloody awful things, and not really much of an excuse for that, so.
Yeah. I mean, and I faced the same kind of, I guess, mixed feelings when I learned about slavery. I mean, on one hand, you have the colonizers coming in and disrupting the African way of life But then also, I think about those people in Africa who allowed their lives to be disrupted and who sold, my ancestors into slavery. And I've read articles where there are apologists saying that, most of the people they sold into slavery were criminals or, war, whatever. But at that may have been true in the beginning, but at some point it was just flat out greed that they were selling my ancestors into, into the Americas, into this very terrible life, hell. And that's something I'm trying to come to terms with still as I write my novels.
I mean, one of the things I found in the research that I did for the Native American character that I did, and I started reading more and more about like Native American history, was just kind of like how badly they had been treated, and not just once or twice, but I mean like over and over and over and over again. And it's like literally they were betrayed so many times. It was like at the end of it, you're reading this stuff and you're just thinking, how the hell could this ever possibly happen? But it did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can be difficult to research. It can be painful.
Yeah.
A lot of things can be
It is
painful.
painful.
It's really tough. Writers have some of the, well, I can't speak for every, obviously, career out there, but writers have some really tough stuff to research, whether it's this kind of history that we're talking about right now, or whether it's like criminal type history. I don't know if you have read Room by Emma Donovan. I'm sorry if I get her name wrong. Donahue, that's it. Sorry. But that is about a young woman and who is like kidnapped, and she's held, in a shed kind of a thing, and all kinds of stuff I can't say on YouTube. Thank you, Margaret. And she had to do all that research to find out like what these victims have been through and stuff like that, so that she could write it accurately. And she said that she did spend some time just crying, because of what she had read. And it's tough, we have to research so much difficult stuff, but it is what makes our books very powerful and very real. So like I always have to say kudos to anybody researching, this kind of painful stuff. It's hard.
Yeah. And it was difficult to write about something like slavery when you're trying to write swashbuckling pirate adventure romance. Sure. But I made a decision early on that I would not shy away from the horrors of slavery. And so I don't sugarcoat it at all in the novel. And I have had feedback that, that the stuff was maybe hard to read, but it happened. So it was hard to live too. And I just don't buy the good masters argument. There were no good masters. No. There were none. They all would sell and divide families, and they all would whip slaves that didn't come, do what they were told. So there were no good. And so, so part of it, I think, is I feel the responsibility of debunking some of the myths that have been perpetuated.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, kind of on a lighter moment.
Oh yes.
I mean, so obviously you're very busy with your writing and work and your travels, but I mean, what do you like to do in your spare time? I think that you're involved in community theater as well.
Oh my God, I love acting. That used to be my raison d'etre when I was growing up. I took acting classes, dance, and all of that. But I just didn't think I would prevail. But when I was 16 years old, I auditioned for the Atlanta Street Theater, and I got in. And I'm gonna brag a little bit because the director of the Atlanta Street Theater was Kenneth Leon, who's gone on to win Tonys and awards for his Broadway shows. So So, but in the street theater, we were improv troupe. So we would go around to middle schools and do improvisation. And I found the storytelling part really exciting. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And yeah, but I still love doing community theater. I haven't done it for quite a while. It's probably been 10 years since I've been in a production. But yeah, I like to act.
That's cool. That must add something to your writing.
It does, because I don't know what it's supposed to add, but everything I write, I read out loud. And you know, I have fun. You know, if I have a Scottish character, then I learn how to do a Scottish accent so that I can read it that way, especially to my group. So yeah, I like to act out and, you know, elocute my novel.
You should join
And
us
that
for-
really helps. That really helps with the rhythm and the cadence of the novel for the reader when it gets to the reader finally. So if you are a writer, I recommend highly that you read it out loud, because then you'll catch what the rhythm is and you know, make changes accordingly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was just reading a style book about they weren't specifically saying reading out loud, but you kind of have to if you're going to do what they're suggesting. And they're saying like the balance of strong versus soft, like words and syllables and all this kind of stuff that you can pick up if you're kind of, you know, saying the cadence a little bit more. So it's exactly what you're saying, really. I think yes, this is exactly what I was going to say. Margaret is saying you'd be a natural for one of the radio dramas on Lurking for Legends as us. So we do live reads, and it would be so much fun if you joined us and did some accents, because we do we just have such a fun time with it. Like we just have a great time. So like if you ever want to do that, definitely let us know. Have an actual actress.
But don't ask Richard to do a Scottish accent.
I didn't say I was any good at it, but I tried.
We have a question from Margaret here, and she says, as you're working on book 2, do you have an idea of how long a series it will be?
I initially want to do three books. I was gonna highlight Denny and Lee, and in this next book, I was just gonna highlight the different siblings' relationships. So it would be Denny, then Jimmy would be in my third book, and right now I'm working on a relationship with. It might be a spoiler to say that I'm working with one of the siblings in his romance. So that's basically what I want to do. I guess 4 for all the siblings, but as I create characters, I want to go down other paths. So maybe novellas in between will satisfy that hankering, or I may end up, you know, making offshoots of this series.
I think it's hard to stop once you start and you really love what you're writing. Like, especially, yeah, I can see that you love it and that there's so much to cover, and just it sounds like a very open universe kind of where it could just
It
keep
is.
going.
And
So,
yeah, and I fall in love with all of my characters, and they all fascinate me, and I want to follow them and see what happens.
definitely. That's great. So probably we're aiming at 4, but it's probably going to be like 10.
Yeah,
Or so
exactly.
anyway. Very cool.
Well, I think we're kind of about at our time now.
Already? Wow.
Yeah, I know it's flown, hasn't it?
Wow. Yeah.
So thanks, Mack, for being on the show tonight. It's been wonderful chatting to you and hearing about your adventures and travels and your books. So thanks for being with us. So where can people find your books?
I am on Amazon.com. You can search for Mack, and I'll pop right up there. And let's see, my book is also on sale on the publisher's website, Inklings Publishing, and you can get the book there. Oh.
There you go. Daughter of Hades
I
is
hope you
happily
enjoy
on
it.
Margaret's e-reader.
Nice.
Yes, tell me how you like it.
Wonderful. Fabulous. And do you have a date by when we can look forward to your next book?
My next book should be out in the fall. We're looking at November for
Great.
a release date. So, yeah. And hopefully I'll have book 2 of Daughter of Hades turned in by December. So you'll
Nice.
get that the following year.
Fantastic. A lot to look forward to. That's great.
Yes.
That's great.
Thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation.
Oh, it was great having you.
That's great. No, thank you for being here. So next week's guest will be science fiction author Richard Paulinelli. Richard began as a freelance writer in 1984 and gained his first fiction credit as the lead writer for the first 2 issues of the Elite Comics sci-fi fantasy series Sea Dragon. After nearly a quarter of a century in the newspaper field, Richard retired and returned to his fiction writing roots. Since then, he has written several award-winning novels, 2 non-fiction sports books, and has appeared in several anthologies, including 8 of the 11-book Tuscany Bay Books Planetary Anthology series and 5 Sherlock Holmes collections. He also writes a Star Trek fan fiction series. That's pretty impressive.
That is.
So, how about you, Christy? What's new in Christy's scary stratosphere?
David is referring not to my personality, but to last week's live read where I played an evil doctor. So, yeah, so I've been working on Grimoire Society's the second book. I've been saying that I've been working on that. It is Kindle Vella, as you guys know. It will be turned into a novel at the end, but right now it's a serial, and I'm on episode 5 already. It's definitely going to be start publishing once a week episodes in July. So I haven't decided on a date yet, but definitely July. And I've been having a great time with it, really. So, if you guys are interested, just to let you know, I'm going to try and grab the link real quick here if I can manage to do 2 things at once. One of the things I'm doing is on my Patreon and in my Facebook group. I'm going to invite you guys to join if you would like. I am starting to do some voting on some fun things. Like, for example, this next book is going to have Victorian gangs. How can you not love that? So it's got Victorian American gangs, and we're voting on things like gangster names. I've got a poll up right now, so you guys can participate. And, I'm going to have voting on different things in different places. So make sure you join me there, and you can find my Patreon at patreon.com/Christy Stratus. It's just $1 a month. You can pay however much a month you want. It's all the same rewards. So that is what I've been doing lately. I think you'd appreciate it, Mac, lots of research into the Victorian gangsters, which you don't hear that much about, honestly, and kind of surprised me. I mean, I know there's a whole movie, Gangs of New York and everything, but once I started really getting into the research and finding out like the truth about how they behaved and how the police could not control them and stuff, it was like exactly the opposite of everything you think of the Victorian era. So I've been having a blast with that. Yeah. So what about you, David? What's new with you?
Well, I released the second of my Logan's World novels last week, and it's flying off the shelves.
It's great.
Fantastically. So I'm really pleased with that. It's been a long time coming to get there, but it's finally out and about and people are reading it. So that's good. And other than that, I'm working on sort of a secret little project in the background which might have some connections with your idea of naming things.
Cool.
So that will be something that hopefully will be seen in the next few months or so.
Nice.
So I think that's it from us. It's time to wrap it up. Thank you to Mack Little for being our guest tonight. And also thank you from myself, Christy, and Richard, who couldn't be with us tonight. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we hope everyone has a great week and stays safe. Thanks very much. Good night.